November 22nd, 1931. The Belmont Hotel, Manhattan. 7:30 p.m. 5 men sat around a mahogany table in a smoke-filled private dining room. These weren't businessmen. They weren't politicians. They were the most powerful crime bosses in America, and they were about to vote on something that would change organized crime forever. The question on the table was simple. Should there ever again be a boss of all bosses in American organized crime? Lucky Luciano looked around the table at the 4 other family heads. Vincent Mangano from Brooklyn, Joe Profaci from South Brooklyn, Tommy Galliano from East Harlem, Joe Bonanno from Manhattan. Each man controlled thousands of soldiers, millions in revenue, and territories that stretched across New York and beyond. For 300 years, Sicilian organized crime had been ruled by dictators. Men who demanded absolute obedience, who settled disputes with blood, who treated other families as subjects rather than equals. Lucky was about to propose something revolutionary: democracy. "Gentlemen," Lucky said, lighting a Cuban cigar, "we're here to decide how this thing of ours operates from now on. Do we go back to the old way, where one man rules everyone else? Or do we try something new?" The room was silent. These men had just survived the bloodiest war in organized crime history. The Castellamarez War had killed over 60 soldiers in 2 years. Families had been destroyed. Fortunes had been lost. Streets had run red with blood. All because 2 old bosses couldn't share power. Lucky had eliminated both those bosses. Masseria in April, Maranzano in September. He could have declared himself the new supreme leader. He could have demanded tribute from every family in America. He could have recreated the dictatorial system that had ruled organized crime since Sicily. Instead, Lucky was proposing to give up absolute power before he even claimed it. And the other 4 men in that room were about to vote on the most important decision in organized crime history. But to understand why Lucky Luciano was willing to share power instead of hoarding it, you need to understand what he'd learned from watching the Castellamarez War destroy everything it touched. Dictatorships don't create wealth. They create conflict. When one man rules everyone else, eventually everyone else tries to kill him. Masseria had been a dictator. He'd demanded tribute from families he'd never helped. He'd settled disputes through violence instead of negotiation. He'd treated other bosses like servants instead of partners. The result was constant warfare, constant instability, constant loss of profit. Maranzano had been a traditionalist. He'd wanted to recreate the feudal system of Sicily in modern America. Rigid hierarchy, absolute obedience, medieval honor codes that made no sense in a business environment. He'd lasted 5 months before Lucky killed him. Lucky saw an opportunity to create something completely different. Not a dictatorship, but a partnership. Not a hierarchy based on tradition, but a corporation based on profit. Not a system that encouraged warfare, but a system that made warfare unnecessary. "Here's what I propose," Lucky continued. 5 families, equal power. Each family controls specific territories and specific businesses. No family interferes with another family's operations. Disputes get settled by commission vote, not gunfire. Vincent Mangano leaned forward. "And who runs this commission?" "Nobody runs it," Lucky replied. "We all vote. Majority rules. No single boss, no supreme leader, no boss of all bosses. Ever again." The silence in the room was deafening. What Lucky was proposing had never existed in organized crime history. A democracy of criminals, a government of gangsters, a system where power was shared instead of hoarded. Joe Profaci shook his head. "Lucky, you killed both bosses in the war. You could take control of everything right now. Why would you give that up?" Lucky smiled. "Because control is an illusion. You think Masseria controlled his territory? He spent all his time fighting to keep it. You think Maranzano controlled his empire? He got killed in his own office. Real power comes from cooperation, not domination. Tommy Galliano was skeptical. What happens when families disagree? What happens when someone breaks the rules? Commission votes on it, Lucky explained. Majority decides the punishment. Could be financial penalties. Could be loss of territory. Could be elimination, if the violation is serious enough. But it's decided by vote, not by one man's temper. Joe Bonanno, the youngest boss at the table, understood immediately. You're talking about turning organized crime into a business. Instead of constant warfare, we focus on making money. Lucky nodded. Exactly. War is expensive. Peace is profitable. If we spend our time fighting each other, we can't focus on fighting the real enemies. Law enforcement, federal agents, politicians who won't stay bought. The conversation continued for 3 hours. The 5 men discussed territorial boundaries, business operations, dispute resolution procedures, and the structure of what would become known as the Commission. They debated details, argued about specifics, and slowly built the framework for modern organized crime. The most important debate centered on the fundamental question of power. In the old system, strength meant the ability to dominate others. In Lucky's new system, strength meant the ability to generate profit while maintaining peace. Think about it, Lucky argued. Every minute we spend fighting each other is a minute we're not making money. Every soldier we lose in family wars is a soldier we can't use against outside threats. Every dollar we spend on ammunition is a dollar we can't invest in businesses. Vincent Mangano was still concerned about the practical aspects. How do we enforce commission decisions? What if a family just ignores our votes? Lucky had thought about this problem extensively. Economic pressure first. If a family breaks commission rules, the other 4 families stop doing business with them. No cooperation, no shared intelligence, no mutual protection. Most problems can be solved with economics. And if economic pressure doesn't work, Profaci asked. Then we vote on stronger measures, Lucky replied. But violence becomes a last resort, not a first option. And it's never one family against another. It's 4 families enforcing commission decisions against one rogue family. The system Lucky was describing would prevent the kind of wars that had nearly destroyed organized crime during the Castellamarese conflict. Instead of one-on-one family feuds, disputes would be resolved by democratic process. Instead of personal vendettas, decisions would be based on business logic. Joe Bonanno raised another crucial point. What about expansion? What happens when we want to operate in other cities? Lucky had anticipated this question too. Commission approves expansion. If you want to operate in Chicago, Philadelphia, Detroit, you present your plan to the Commission. We vote on whether it conflicts with existing operations or creates unnecessary risks. This territorial coordination would prevent the kind of conflicts that erupted when multiple families tried to operate in the same markets without communication or agreement. Instead of competition through warfare, families would coordinate through negotiation. At 10:45 p.m., Lucky called for the historic vote. All in favor of establishing the commission system, as I've described it, with 5 equal families and democratic decision-making, raise your hand. One by one, the hands went up. Vincent Mangano, Joe Profaci, Tommy Galliano, Joe Bonanno. Finally, Lucky Luciano. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in organized crime history, democracy had defeated dictatorship. Cooperation had replaced domination. Business logic had overcome medieval tradition. Gentlemen, Lucky announced, we just created something new. Not a kingdom, but a corporation. Not a dictatorship, but a democracy. The Commission is born. The 5 men shook hands around the table. They'd just agreed to share power, instead of fighting for it. They'd chosen profit over pride, Cooperation over competition. Business over bloodshed. The commission system Lucky created that night lasted for decades. The 5 families established in that Manhattan hotel room continued operating as independent but coordinated organizations well into the 21st century. The democratic principles they agreed to became the foundation for organized crime operations throughout America. More importantly, Lucky had proven something revolutionary about power. Real strength comes not from the ability to dominate others, but from the ability to create systems that benefit everyone. Sustainable power is shared power. Lasting empires are built on cooperation, not conquest. The Commission prevented wars by creating alternatives to warfare. Instead of fighting for territory, families negotiated territorial agreements. Instead of settling disputes through violence, they settled disputes through voting. Instead of treating other families as enemies, they treated them as business partners. Law enforcement agencies studying the commission system were amazed by its sophistication and longevity. This wasn't a traditional criminal hierarchy based on fear and violence. This was a legitimate government structure that happened to be illegitimate in its purposes. Federal investigators spent decades trying to penetrate and understand the commission system. What they found was a corporate structure more sophisticated than many legal businesses. Clear territorial divisions, democratic decision-making processes, conflict resolution mechanisms, and coordinated strategic planning. The November 22nd vote changed organized crime forever. Lucky Luciano could have become the most powerful crime boss in American history. Instead, he chose to become the architect of the most successful criminal organization in American history. The old bosses fought for crowns. Lucky built a government. The old bosses demanded obedience. Lucky created partnership. The old bosses ruled through fear. Lucky governed through consensus. November 22, 1931. 5 men voted to end 300 years of criminal dictatorship. 1 vote ended centuries of blood feuds. 1 decision created modern organized crime. 1 meeting proved that even criminals could choose democracy over dictatorship. The commission vote wasn't just about organizing crime. It was about organizing power itself. Lucky Luciano had discovered something that governments and corporations would spend decades trying to understand. Shared power is stronger than hoarded power. Cooperative strength defeats competitive strength. Democratic systems outlast dictatorial systems. The 5 men who walked out of the Belmont hotel that night had just created the most successful criminal enterprise in world history. Not through violence, but through voting. Not through conquest, but through cooperation. Not through tradition, but through innovation. If this story of power, democracy, and criminal revolution moved you, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like. If you understand that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is share your strength. Share this with someone who knows that cooperation beats competition every time. What would you have voted if you were at that table? Let me know in the comments below.